I'm very, very pleased to be here. This is the last phase of a 21-day lecture tour that I've done in Europe. It started off in the Netherlands a couple weeks ago, and then in Berlin, and then in Brussels, a week in Paris, and now I'm here, and hopefully we'll save the best for last. Now, I want to thank all the organizers of this program. I want to thank Diaspora, but I'm particularly grateful to Sister Rosemary Amodi, because that is the person that I've had the most direct interaction with. So please give her a round of applause. I'm not sure where she is. Now, I want to thank the moderator for the introduction. I have about 14 minutes now to discuss about 200,000 years of history. And it took me about a minute to walk from over there to over here, so I should get an extra minute for that. Now, anybody who's seen me present before knows that what I have a tendency to do is to show pictures with the maxim that seeing is believing and a picture's worth 1,000 words. Now, unfortunately, we are not prepared to do a slide presentation this morning, but I'm fortunate to have another opportunity this afternoon, so hopefully you will get a chance to come to my seminar. Now, when we talk about the African diaspora, that is what I typically call the global African community. And I want to inform you from the beginning that that community consists of about 1.5 billion people. So perhaps the first lesson that we should learn is that we are not a minority. We are among the majority of the people in the world. When we look at history, let me take my watch off so I can look at it, because I know what it's like when a moderator just comes up and grabs you with a hook, and I don't want that to happen today. When we look at history, we are using this information to empower people. All strong people emphasize history all the time, and weak people don't. And African people have the greatest story, I would contend, that has never been told. And when I say African, I'm an African too. I happen to be born in America, but believe me, if anybody tells me I'm not an African, you better be prepared to fight, because I'm as much African as anybody. So it's an honor to be the first speaker. Now, 3 broad phases of history, and I'm afraid I may upset some of the other presenters with the outline. You see, I wrote a really broad, comprehensive outline right here, and I did bring an ink pen in case I wanted to add something to it while I'm here. 3 broad phases, and this is very different from the way it was when I was going to the University in Southern California. The book that we studied from at California State University at Northridge in Southern California was an excellent book in the Pan-African Studies program called From Slavery to Freedom. It's a magnificent book, but the title is all bad, because it would give the impression that our history begins with slavery and that we've achieved freedom. Now, I can't speak for you in England, but certainly Africans around the world are still struggling for that latter phase. So let me begin with another paradigm, another worldview in respect to the African presence and the global African community. First of all, the first humanity comes out of Africa, that African people are the original people, that there is only one race, and that's the human race, which has an African origin. And as a matter of fact, there's been a set of bones found in Central Africa, in this country called Chad, where you have blue-black people. Bones dated 7 to 9 million years old, the earliest known precursors of modern humanity. But based on studies of DNA, we know that modern human beings, or Homo sapiens sapiens, originated in Africa hundreds of thousands of years ago, and over a period of time, perhaps beginning 200,000 years ago, they begin to filter out of Africa. I've spent a lot of time among Aboriginal people of Australia, and they tell me that they've been there for 120,000 years. The first time I went there in 1998, I made the comment that we all come from Africa. I said this at a big conference. I thought they were going to clap and go ballistic and elect me the Prime Minister of Australia, which would be an improvement based on what they have. And nobody hardly said anything. Now, that night at the nightclub, where the real conference took place, people came up to me and says, "Brother Runoko, we like you a great deal." These are Aboriginal people, but we don't think we come from Africa. I said, "Really, where do you think you come from then?" They said, "We've always been here. We think the Africans came from Australia." I'd never heard a perspective like that before. And then when I went in 2000, I asked another group, "Well, where are you all from?" Because I want all black people to say they come from Africa and to be proud of it. They say, "Runoko, we come from the Milky Way." I didn't even comment on that one. But the last time I was there, sisters and brothers said, we all come from the same mother. We all come from Africa. These are people who have been away from Africa for 120,000 years. So you have Africans scattered all over the world from that first phase. If not for these early migrations out of Africa, the world would have remained devoid of human life. It would have remained a desert. So we are the original people, the aboriginal people of the world, and there's no part of the world that we are strangers in, and there's no part of the world that we cannot claim as our own. That's a very important distinction to make, that our history doesn't begin with slavery, but our history begins as the first humanity. But it's not enough to say that you were first. It's very important to be able to talk about what you did. And what did we do? We did some magnificent things, and we've only scratched the tip of the iceberg in terms of African achievement. For example, in the realm of civilization itself, we could start in Africa with the Nile Valley civilization, of which Egypt of the pharaohs is the prime example. But those same Africans laid the basis, planted the seeds, sisters and brothers, for civilization in the Tigris Euphrates, long before Saddam Hussein was a twinkle in anybody's eye. They went and planted the seeds of civilization in Pakistan, in the Indus Valley civilization, and in the Yangtze and Yellow River civilizations in China, in Southeast Asia, in ancient America, and even in ancient Europe. And then you have the enslavement period. The problem is we typically begin our look at Africa from the perspective or from the time of enslavement, as though we never did anything. We waited for a white man to come in the room and turn on the light, and we were just chilling until he got there. We didn't do anything, is the assumption that we have, and I'm insulted by that. Or we believe that the history of Africa begins with colonization, and so you automatically have a stigma. Many people in the United States are so ignorant, black folk, African Americans, Africans living in America, that it is not unusual for us to say, thank God for slavery, because at least it got us out of Africa. Can you imagine another ethnic group saying, thank God for the Holocaust because it got us out of Europe? But we are taught to hate ourselves, not just in America, not just in the diaspora, but Africa itself. When I go to Africa, I'm amazed at the people I see using skin bleaching creams, hair straightening products, white Jesus everywhere, because the same colonization that affects us outside of Africa affects us there too. But let's look at enslavement for a moment, and let's try to look at it from the perspective of those Africans who fought in the face of overwhelming odds to maintain their basic humanity. This is what we want to look at. For example, you might be surprised to know that the first republic in the Western Hemisphere, called Palmares, was established in 1698. It lasted for 100 years. Africans that we commonly call Maroons. A group of them kept me captive in Jamaica last year. I know a lot about the Maroons. Africans called the Maroons maintained a nation state for 100 years beginning in 1698. They fought the Portuguese and the Dutch. We know that in the United States you have a sustained war of liberation by a group of Africans and Native Americans called Seminoles that lasted for 150 years. Some of these black people were never defeated. And how could we forget the role of the people of Haiti, led by Toussaint and Dessalines, and the struggle that they have waged? So these things are very, very important. Now, that is how we can use this information to inspire. Cotton picking don't move me. But Africans who fought to burn the slave master's house down to get their freedom, that's motivating. What is violent to some people is liberation efforts to others, because we have to begin, and I'm not trying to incite that, but my point is we have to begin to look at things from our perspective. Somebody says that the essence of power is the ability to define someone's reality and make them live according to that definition as though it is a definition of their own. And this is pretty much what is happening to us. Other people define our reality for us. They even tell us what beauty is for us, what success is for us, even what is happiness. Africans have to define their own reality. Now, let me talk right quick, just a moment or two, about some aspects of the global African community. The first place I would look at is Asia. And I have been called the world's leading authority on the African presence in Asia, and that means we're in a whole lot of trouble because I don't know that much. But I do know that Asia is the next continent after Africa to be populated, And there may be more black people in Asia than are in Africa itself. India, for example, this may surprise you to know, has the largest concentration of black people or African people in any single country in the world. There are more than twice as many black people in India as there are in Nigeria. 4 times as many black people in India as there are in Brazil. There are about 300 million black folks in India alone, and I think I've met about 299 million of them personally. You have black people throughout Southwest Asia. You have Africans even now in countries like Cambodia, in Burma, in Thailand, in Malaysia. We don't even talk about them. I'm told that at one time there were enough black people in China powerful enough to establish their own kingdom. In Europe, we have a similar phenomenon. You have black people in ancient Greece. By the 2nd century AD, more than 1/3 of all the members of the Roman Senate were born in Africa. You have African popes, African emperors, black Madonnas in Europe. You have people like Alexander Pushkin, whose maternal great-grandfather was born in Africa. Pushkin is called the father of Russian literature. He's the Russian Autumn, the Russian springtime, the Russian morning, the father of all things Russian, and he was very proud of his African lineage. You have people in France like Alexander Dumas, whose father was born in the Caribbean. Dumas is the person who wrote The Count of Monte Cristo, the man in the Iron Mask, the Three Musketeers. He's the one who told us a motto that we could use today, one for all and all for one. But you know what else he said? I like a whole lot more, and this is for the ladies in particular. He said that a man's mind is elevated to the status of the women with whom he associates. I know you like that. And then you have, of course, the black populations of Australia that I already talked about, the Pacific Islands. When you go to Fiji, the people tell you, you go into a Fijian village, and you see these people, and you say, where are you from? They say, we from Africa. Where are you from? I said, well, I'm from Africa too. Before you can finish, they say, you from Africa? We from Africa. And then they say, have you been to Africa, Professor Rashidi? Yeah, many times. Tell us we want to go to Africa. Isn't that refreshing? I doubt if we would get that response if we did a survey in this room today. But here are people in the Pacific Islands who embrace Africa. And then you have the Western Hemisphere itself. You have black people based on DNA and paleontology and cultural evidence who are the first people of the Western Hemisphere, who walked out of Africa into Asia and came across the Bering Isthmus and walked all the way down to the tip of Argentina. My history does not begin with slavery. How dare you suggest that? And then, according to the works of the great Dr. Ivan van Sertima, who we very much wanted to bring to this conference today, you have Africans who sailed from Northeast Africa, the Nile Valley, and also West Africa, and impact classical American civilization. And then you have the enslavement process that went on for so long it became a way of life. The sisters and brothers who endured that process, we owe them something. We owe them to say that will never happen again. And we ensure and pledge future generations that that will never happen again. Now, I think, and I'm going to end with this, that when it comes to the enslavement period and the Ma'afa and Africans being carried by the millions out of Africa, we need to keep in mind that I think, in fact, let me just use a few cliches here from some of my favorite scholars to wrap up. One is, here we go, Sister Zawadi, that you're not an African because you're born in Africa. You're an African because Africa is born in you. Let's start with that one. That we spend far too much time talking about where white folks dropped us off and not nearly enough about where they picked us up from. That just because a cat has babies in an oven, you don't call the babies biscuits. Just because you are born in a place, your nationality is not determined by that. And then we have, and I'll finish with this. You know, I don't want to finish. I'm just warming up now. But we got all these people looking at me over here, looking at me kind of mean, like, when is this brother going to sit down? We have the words of Marcus Mosiah Garvey, to me, the greatest African in modern times. Garvey, by the way, who said, Africa for the Africans, those at home and those abroad, who said, up you mighty race, you can accomplish what you will, who organized 6 to 12 million Africans around the world. Garvey even had a branch of the UNIA and ACL in Australia. And we're trying to get some information on it. You can organize black people in Australia, you've done some serious work. Once somebody asked Garvey, how did you come to form this great organization? Garvey said, and remember this, sister, because Garvey was a prophet. He said, I looked around for the black man's army, his navy, his men of big affairs, and could not find them. So I decided to help create them. This is the mindset that we must have. Stop saying what black folks can't do and roll up your sleeves and go to work. Go to work. Garvey was born in Jamaica, I think in 1883 or 1887. I always get those dates mixed up. Must have been 87. And someone asked him once, and this is for you. This is for us, all us we. Someone asked him once, are you an African or are you a Jamaican? And Garvey said, I will not give up a continent for an island. Thank you very much.
Brother Runoko, thank you for that inspirational and thought-provoking talk.